Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Agentic AI Minicon from MarkTech Post. Super excited to have you here today. We've got a packed schedule here today. Just to give you a sense, this is the schedule. As you can see, we're doing 15-minute sessions. It's like a speed dating, very fast, very fun, and you're going to learn a lot in a very little bit of time. So pretty exciting. In the interest of time, we're going to get started right away. And let's get going. So we're going to stay on schedule. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. You get to see my talk. All right. So I'm the first one to go. Very exciting. We're going to talk about pricing and business models for AI agents. And I am J.M. Mommsen. A little bit about myself. I've been in AI since 2006. Yes, that's a while back. Back in the day, we were doing something. We weren't calling it AI. We were calling rule-based machine learning. Then it became machine learning. Then it became CNNs, then RNNs, ANNs, then generative AI, and so on. Since then, I've built not one, but two agentic network platforms. So feel free to ping me if you ever want to discuss that directly. And I'm an advisor to several AI startups, some in construction, such as Exotigo, or legal and finance, Regology, or voice AI bots like Talker AI, and so on, cybersecurity. Uh, I'm also a co-editor of MarkTech Post, and I am a Stanford alumni, and I'm based in the Bay Area, specifically in Palo Alto. All right, so let's talk about pricing and business models, right? For AI agents. So the first thing you want to think about as you think about what should be the business model for AI agent is, what's the value proposition? What does the AI agents do for your end client? Do they increase efficiency and productivity? Which is typically what they do, right? Sort of like they probably do that. And as a result, typically they'll reduce what's called operational cost. They'll reduce cost of running the business, of cost of doing a task. But maybe they add more value than that. Maybe they help with decision making or identifying some kind of interesting things. And or maybe they enhance customer experience, not just reduce the cost of customer experience, but maybe they even enhance it. Or maybe they just drive new revenue streams, increase sales. That's amazing. But what's interesting is the way I think about this. You can categorize all these benefits in two categories. One of them is efficiency, and those are sort of the first three I mentioned, the first two I mentioned here, or performance improvement. And those are the last three, right? And as you start to think about your AI agents, they either provide efficiency or performance, or they provide both. And you got to figure that out first, right? Okay, so other examples of what's efficiency. So when you hear about Cursor or Copilot from Microsoft or everything that was announced yesterday at Google I/O, if you guys, I was just there at Google I/O yesterday, and they released like three or four products that basically make the software developer, 10x more efficient, right? Another type of efficiency is, can I deploy an AI agent so my customer service reps are 30% more productive? Means they can handle 30% more calls. Or maybe it's an AI agent that helps prepare invoices so that a finance person can then send the invoices, right? In terms of performance, what I also saw yesterday at Google I/O, they have some AI agents that will basically go and hunt down bugs. And that would be a zero bug performance goal, right? And that's performance. Maybe you have an AI agent that not only helps the customer service reps be more productive, but as a result, the issues are resolved in half the time, and that's performance. Or maybe because your AI agent prepares invoices, now instead of collecting money for this business in 30 days, you collect money in 27 days, and that's very valuable, right? So you get an idea. On the left is Copilot. On the right is what people call AI agents, but here I'll call it autonomous AI agents just to transform, right? Okay, so if we take a step back, and this is not specific to agents, this is what's been around for 50 years. I went to Stanford Business School, and this is what they teach you, right? As you think about core pricing strategies, right? There's what's called cost plus pricing. It's typically what Dell did in the day. They would buy some hardware, put it together, and add another 15%. And those margins are, there's margins there, but they're pretty small. Another way to price, think about it, is like, what are my competitors doing? And then I'll price around there, a little lower, a little higher, depending on what I want to present. but then you have to figure out what the competitive pricing is. Or probably you kind of get it where I'm going with this because of the big pluses here is value-based pricing, right? Understanding what is the value delivering and charging based on that. Now, if we think about, okay, great, we got the strategies, but what are the different pricing models, right? You've got the consumption-based pricing. This is typically what GCP, AWS, Azure have been doing, right? Or OpenAI, right? When you pay for an API, you're doing consumption-based pricing. And what's happening here is I put the risk as a provider of an AI agent, I put the risk on the client. The more they consume, the more they pay. If they don't consume, I'm not bearing any cost. And that's typically done for a commodity, right? And it's a sort of a dollar per token kind of consumption you can think about. Another one is subscription pricing. And here you're taking a risk. You're saying, I will provide this AI agent, and maybe I'll give one AI agent per employee. So it's like a dollar per seat, typically what you've been doing for software, right? So this is how Salesforce back in the day charges for this, right? And that also eventually will become commodity. And here you're taking a risk because if the person charges more than what they typically, I mean, uses more than what you thought they were going to use, you're going to lose some money. Another way to do this is to think about activity-based pricing. Think about a workflow. Maybe an AI agent is going through a workflow. It's different AI agents doing a workflow. And there you kind of balance the relationship between the risks, between the provider, yourself, and the client. But here, what's interesting here is you start to go towards value. If I'm able to execute a workflow end to end, then I provide value. And then you can start to charge per workflows. And the holy grail, what's called outcome-based pricing. And you're going to hear about this more and more in the next 6 months. You take on all the risk. You have to perform as an AI agent provider. You're providing a high value, and you're going to charge per successful goal executed. And of course, because you do this, you charge higher margins. Okay. So what's interesting is, in a lot of cases, depending on your agent, you could actually apply almost any of these pricing models. It's, sometimes only one fits, but sometimes. So let me give you an example. You've all heard about AI SDRs. SDRs mean sales development representative. What are these? These are AI agents that autonomously send emails to cold prospects or make phone calls or reach out on LinkedIn autonomously and try to get leads and try to book meetings, right? You could say, well, I can do consumption-based pricing. Let's say these AI agents are powered by the OpenAI or the Gemini API, and I'll just take that price at 15%. And how many tokens are used to send emails or do voice and so on, right? I'll just charge 15%. That's my business model. And if the client sends a lot of emails because very excited, has a lot of people they want to reach out to, then I'll charge more eventually, and that's how it goes. But you could also say, oh, I'll do subscription pricing. I'll add one agent per month equals $1,000. Why is that? Well, a human sales rep is like $5,000 per month. So you'll say, I'll charge 20% of that, and the agent will do what it does. And for some clients, that makes sense. This says, oh, I'm paying 20% of that. Or you could say, I'll do activity-based pricing. What if I charge $1 per email sent? What if I charge $2 per call? The dollar per email is a bit high. $2 per call is actually pretty on par there. Now, obviously, what's the risk? Let's pause here. What's the risk on the activity-based pricing? What if the call lasts 10 minutes? That call might cost you $5 and you just charge $2. It's pretty bad. But so you have to figure that out, right? And then you're taking a risk there. Or you do outcome-based pricing. So the goal of an AI SDR is to book a meeting where an account manager, an account executive, a sales account executive will join the meeting. And typically you can charge $300 for that, for successful meeting book, where the client shows up, right? The client has to show up. And now you see the difference. And this is all for the same AI agent, you could charge very differently. Okay, so what are some of the challenges, right? Well, if you're doing consumption-based pricing, well, actually you're like, well, there's no challenges. I'm using, Google Vertex and pulling in some Gemini there, or using OpenAI or Claude. There's no risk. Well, actually there is. I'll tell you where it happens because I've faced this myself. If you start to say, no, I'm using several providers. I'm using Claude, I'm using OpenAI, I'm using Google APIs. And I'm using this because I'm using three AI agents. Somehow they're optimized. They're each using a different model. Some are big models, some are small models, just to do deliver one thing. And now you have this mumbo jumbo of tokens, mumbo jumbo of pricing, and sometimes it's easy to track. Sometimes it gets very hard to track. And if you can't track, you can't charge based on consumption. Um, Subscription pricing. How much will they consume? Are they sending out a lot of emails, making a lot of calls, or just one email, one call per day, right? Activity-based pricing. And this is an example I just talked about, right? Are these calls 1 minute, 10 minute? And the way you did it, because I've deployed these solutions, right, is you say, I'm going to take an assumption. I will, on average, historically, these calls are 3 minutes, so I'm going to assume that. But once you deploy, if they start jumping to 5 minutes because people like talking to the AI agent because it's a nice AI agent, then this might bubble up and you might be on the water there. And outcome-based pricing. Well, the tricky part there is typically before you deploy, you really don't know if you're going to be successful in hitting these goals. And the bigger question is maybe you say, no, I'll be successful, but is it going to take a day, a week, 6 months before you start hitting these goals? And if you don't hit these goals, the outcomes, you don't get paid. All right. So how do you think about choosing your AI agent pricing model? Here's a strategic framework for you, right? So let's recap, right? What are the challenges? Well, the costs are dynamic. The compute is all over the place, APIs are all over the place, consumption can go up and down. We don't know if the AI is going to use a lot, a little, and then the values, it's not set. Um, Going from one AI agent to another, some are just only efficiencies, some are efficiency plus performance, some are non-linear, which is if you deploy one AI agent, there's one value, but if you deploy three, then it's 10x the value. So it's not linear necessarily, right? So here's a framework for you, right? So first of all, you want to discover, basically understand what's happening here, right? What are your AI costs, customers, and market? Then you want to align and select. Then you want to implement. And more importantly, you want to iterate, right? A lot of the companies I've worked with, we start with one thing and then we iterate. That's what we do. All right, so let's go for discover. What do we mean by discover? Well, you got to know your landscape. Your AI agent, what's the core value proposition? Efficiency, performance. What's the cost structure? What are we looking at? Are you running this on an open source model and just paying for the compute? What are usage metrics? And what type of clients are you dealing with? What's your market? What are your customers? Who's your target audience? What do they care about? Right? And then you have to align the strategy, right? And your pricing model can depend where you are in the life cycle of your product, of your company. Are you going for market share? Are you going for max revenue? Are you saying, I don't want max revenue, but I want predictable revenue? That's subscription typically, right? Outcome would be max revenue, maybe, but you're taking a lot of risk. Okay, then you select. Step 3, you select. Does my business model and pricing reflect value to the customer, right? This is where you're going to optimize. Does it feel fair to the customer? Do I cover my cost? Do I actually make money? Will it scale? Will it grow? As I get more clients, I deploy more AI agents. And as they go back to the strategy, right? We talked about market share, max revenue, and so on. And then you implement and you iterate. That's what you do. So you develop, maybe you start finalizing, maybe you do tiers. You've seen this all the time. It applies also to AI agents, right? Your freemium, your so on, so on, so on. And then you launch and you monitor and you track. Are people churning? Do they sign up for a trial and then churn? Maybe the pricing's too high. Maybe the pricing's not just flexible enough. It's dynamic. And frankly, it's something that you should review every quarter, collect the data, and take it from there. Right on time, we're going to jump into our next session. The last thing I want to say is, once you figure out your pricing, you say, how do I get clients? Well, a MarTech post, we can do a lot of lead generations for your AI agents. That's what we do. And I figured you appreciate this. We offer 2 types of pricing, activity-based pricing and value-based pricing, because we adjust and we feel that's what's fair.